In a development that could result in the merger of at least two big airlines in the Indian skies, Singapore Airlines has confirmed that it is in talks with Tata Group for the integration of Vistara and Air India. Singapore Airlines owns a 49% stake in Tata Sia Airlines that operates Vistara, while the remaining 51% is owned by India's Tata Group. However, a statement by Singapore Airlines added that the discussions were ongoing and no definitive terms were agreed upon. Founded by Jamshedji Tata in 1868, the Tata Group is a global enterprise headquartered in India but operating in more than 100 countries. Tata owns the erstwhile international carrier Air India, which it bought from the government in January of 2022. In addition to Vistara and Air India, Tata Group also controls the low-cost carrier and Air Asia India. Air India is in fact already in the process of rebuilding its fleet, targeting a domestic market share of at least 30%. Over the next 5 years, the erstwhile Maharaja is looking to repair its reputation after years of losses. For more on this story, we're now joined by Jitendra Bhargav, former Executive Director of Air India and author of the book, The Descent of Air India. Mr. Bhargav, thanks so much for joining WION. Now, what should we make of this statement that's been issued by Singapore Airlines? It has generated a great deal of interest.
Well, this statement is on very expected lines because one could not have expected 100% Singapore Airlines owned. Then you have Vistara with 49% of Singapore Airlines and 51% of Tata's, and Air India with 100% Tata's. Take, for example, a flight being operated between India and Singapore, which means 3 airlines would have been operating. Then from India, if you were to have London flights, Vistara operating the flights and Air India operating the flights. So it was only logical that at some stage, the 2 airlines would get together. In the aviation industry, we have the very often used word called code share. Airlines go to another airline to have code share arrangement so that it expands the reach of an airline. So when you have 2 airlines under the same stable, there is no reason why they should exist and compete on the same sectors differently, harming the overall interest. So I had expected this would come in. But what we must recall is that when Tata were bidding for Air India at that time, Singapore Airlines were not in favor for it. The law provides for a foreign airline up to 49% equity. They decided to stay away. Tata bid on their own 100% equity they acquired. Now, perhaps there has been a rethink, and the logical argument being very clear that how can Singapore Airlines stay away when Vistara with 49% of their stake competing directly with Air India. And the costs are a big thing in this highly competitive market that we have. So unless they can control costs, and one of the factors controlling costs is the synergy between the 2 airlines, and no better synergy than merging the 2 airlines.
All right, no better synergy than merging the 2 airlines. You certainly seem to be a strong advocate of that. But let me go a step further and ask you, is there now a distinct possibility of Air India, Vistara and Air Asia, 3 of India's biggest airlines merging under a common brand? And if yes, what would that mean for India's aviation industry? Do we need more airlines?
No, we must look at one thing very clearly, that Vistara and Air India are full-service carriers. Air Asia is a low-cost airline. So when Air Asia will merge with Air India Express, which also Tata's acquired along with Air India. So you will have a low-cost airline, Air India, Air Asia and Air India Express, and a full-service carrier, Vistara and Air India. So where you have a very highly competitive, price-sensitive market, the low-cost airline will operate and garner business. And on the long-haul sectors or prime metro cities, you will have the full-service carriers operating. Because let's not forget the fact that 81% of the total domestic market is with low-cost airlines. Air India and Vistara combined have just about 18-odd%. So the rest of it is spread among the low-cost airlines. So they cannot simply stay away from the market by not having a low-cost airline in the state.
All right, interesting. So the low-cost airline will perhaps be kept out of this equation, but you do believe that the other two airlines perhaps should be merged. It's an idea whose time has come. Another question that arises is, as of now, Singapore Airlines has a stake in Vistara. Do you see Singapore Airlines going forward having a stake in Air India next?
You know, the natural corollary will be that, yes, Singapore Airlines will have a stake in Air India. If Vistara merges with Air India, Singapore Airlines have two options. One, to totally withdraw and let Tatas have 100% equity of Vistara, which is not the right way of looking at the business, because India is a hugely growing market and Singapore Airlines would not like to lose out. And then, of course, you have Air India very clearly on this way that, look, it needs money at the moment. Let's not forget, it got this airline from the government with a lot of investment on the anvil to be made to improve the product, both in terms of hardware and software, with expansion of fleet, everything to be done. So if Singapore Airlines is to acquire equity in Air India, it would mean infusion of funds, making that much easier for Tatas to accelerate the pace of Air India's revival. So it's going to be an excellent proposition from the Air India perspective. Merger, Vistara and Air India. Singapore Airlines having a stake, which means technology, code-share arrangements, the professionalism that Singapore Airlines brings in. Because, you know, one thing that we have often forgotten is that, yes, Tatas were the pioneers when Air India was founded and way back in 1932 and after the nationalization in 1953. But none of the current Tata people have had any association with the airline industry.
Okay.
Because when you had Air Asia, Tony Fernandez was running it. Vistara has a lot of Singapore Airlines officials who are managing it. So Air India by itself is the first Tata venture. So if Singapore Airlines becomes a stakeholder in Air India, that will be the best thing is what Air India can be expected. Accelerate the pace of revival, give it a professional touch, give it a quality product tagline, and then, of course, Air India, with India as the growing market, can conquer the Western world, which is so far being dominated largely by the Gulf carriers. So Air India would logically get the India originating market, and that is what one should expect from Air India.
Very interesting. You're saying Singapore Airlines having a stake in Air India is the best thing that can actually happen to Air India and would enable Indian aviation to, in a sense, conquer the Western market. Interesting times ahead for the Indian aviation sector indeed. And let's not forget, the pandemic years have been rather tough for the sector. Thanks very much, Jitendra Bhargava, for sharing your views with us. Thank you.